Harry Truman is, of all the presidents I've researched, all of them are extraordinary people in their own way. You could say extraordinary in a negative way or extraordinary in a positive way, but they're all extraordinary people. You don't get to be president of the United States without, having something that elevates you to that point. Yeah, there's luck involved for sure. Let's not discount that, but it's not random how that works. So each of the people is an interesting case study, but Harry Truman is kind of unique among them. Kind of ordinary Midwestern kid, farm boy, who became president. Who, in many cases, people thought, well, there's no way, we didn't think that, a president would die in office as FDR did and leave Truman president. But that's pure and unadulterated bullshit. Everyone knew in 1944 and 1945 that Roosevelt was near death. Yeah, Roosevelt knew Roosevelt was near death. So everyone knew that, we didn't want prior vice president to take over the war effort and kind of do the cleanup work. What I've read about the decision-making process was that Roosevelt may not have been kind of deeply involved and maybe a little ambivalent about the whole thing, but his closest advisors and the people definitely were not. And they knew that they needed someone who had his shit together in order to make sure that the World War II would be successfully concluded. And Harry Truman absolutely fit the bill as a person. I was just listening to a podcast talking about Harry Truman from a guy I respect, and I won't name him here, but talking about Harry Truman in kind of less than flattering terms as compared to Roosevelt. And I suppose when you compare anyone to Roosevelt, maybe the comparison would be maybe less than flattering. But the more you read about Harry Truman, the more you really do realize he probably was one of the best choices at the time. And as luck would have it, certainly defeated Dewey, Thomas Dewey, the Attorney General and Governor of New York, who was his opponent. This is the story of the 1948, the famous Dewey defeats Truman headline in the Chicago Tribune. I actually want to give you a little, I love Harry Truman, but I could go on and on. I actually want to give you a little color commentary on Thomas Dewey and what he was like and what kind of person he was, because we don't really think about him that much anymore. If you go and you try to get a book on Thomas Dewey, good luck. There are some papers, there are some different things, but I think long past time someone really wrote a book about, at David McCullough's level on Truman, about Thomas Dewey. So let me give you just a little bit of a picture of what Thomas Dewey was like. So, unlike Truman, Dewey was a rising politician in the most populous state in the Union at the time, New York. Both Roosevelts, Theodore and Franklin, had been governor of New York, and the national appeal made sense. A secure New York meant a massive electoral college advantage. A popular governor meant a secure New York, and Dewey was popular. As district attorney, he secured convictions for Richard Whitney, a former president of the New York Stock Exchange, for embezzlement. He prosecuted political boss James Joseph Hines on 13 counts of racketeering, essentially crippling Tammany Hall in New York. He earned the nickname Gangbuster for successfully prosecuting famed mobster Lucky Luciano. In fact, his office achieved a 94% conviction rate of defendants brought to trial. In other words, if Dewey's office got you into court, you were fucked. In 1938, the 36-year-old Dewey, you read that correctly, 36, nearly won the governor's race in New York, losing only by 1.4% of the vote. But in 1942, he won. In 1946, he won again. Similar to Truman, Dewey was a fighter, diligent, hardworking, and personable, at least in small groups. Not as bookish as Truman, he understood how people made decisions. Living and working in New York remains a great way to learn that rough and tumble skill. Dewey was supremely effective at arranging the pieces to get what he wanted. Also, like Truman, he was a bit funny looking. A short man with a slick mustache. He looked like a caricature of a New York lawyer straight out of Central Casting. But most like Truman, Dewey was a decent person. Yes, he was ambitious. All politicians are. But he saw success as the result of hard work for his constituents to make their lives better. Dewey had proved himself ready for the nomination for president in 1948. Republicans hadn't had a serious chance to unseat the Democrats since the 1920s, but they had been steadily making gains. In fact, Dewey gave Roosevelt his closest race in 1944. Beating Truman seemed much easier by comparison. Besides, how could you not beat a president whose approval rating had bottomed out below 30% in the previous year? Dewey simply had to play it cool, avoid controversy, and not screw it up. The election was his. I think what's important to understand about this episode, there's more of a portrait I paint of Dewey in here, but that gives you a good thumbnail sketch. What's important to understand is that everyone thought Thomas Dewey would be president in 1948. All of the pundits did, all the magazine editors did, and how Truman won is one of the great, not only comeback stories of all time. What people forget, he wasn't just going after Dewey. He was going after his own party had splintered. The Dixiecrats in the South had essentially had their own candidate they were running. And there was a kind of a progressive, more of a left-wing candidate that was challenging Truman from the left. So you had Republicans, moderate Democrats, which Truman was Truman. So you had Dewey, Truman, but you also had, you had a right-wing Democrat, left-wing Democrat, you had a four-way race that Truman won. Usually when you split your own party into three, two pieces, you're done. You split it into three, no chance. Truman won in a four-way race against all of them. How he did it was one of the greatest kind of persuasion stories of all time. You'll enjoy it in here. So Marketer in Chief comes out July 4th. You'll like this chapter. It has a ton of profanity in it, so I think for good reason, but you be the judge of that.